Hello and welcome to the Last Edit podcast. I am Citizen Sleeve, and this is my fabulous friend.
Silver Hawkins.
Now, for those who don't know, the Last Edit podcast is a weekly film podcast where we choose alternate films and then we take a deep dive discussion on them along the way. We're on Spotify, iTunes, all your Audible apps. We're also on YouTube, obviously, so check all that out. And by all means, talk to us in the comments. We love discussing movies. That's why we have such passion for finding little gems you might not have heard of before. So this isn't a little gem, as I state that to begin with. This is one of my favorite animated movies of all time, and Netflix just suddenly got a load of Studio Ghibli movies, which is wonderful, quite frankly, for
Yep.
those who've never been able to access them before. So there's been a number of waves, but in the first wave is a film I watched when I was 8 or 9, I think, on TV, and that is Hayao Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky, and that is just a
Miyazaki.
wonderful film. Miyazaki, sorry, from 1986. Silver will do this because I always pronounce these things incorrectly every single damn time. Um, Okay, so a bit about it's quite an esteemed film. A lot of people know it. It's just one of those films that kind of got me into anime. I think at the time I'd never really come. We discussed it last night. I don't really. I still call it manga because that's how I grew up. But prior to even I knew what manga was, the first Asian cartoon I watched, I guess, that wasn't a series was this film,
Right.
and it blew me away at the time. Okay, so quick narrative recap because we always launch into something and forget to tell people the actual story first. Okay, so a girl called Sheeta falls from the sky one day after two warring factions, what looks like the military and some pirates, are fighting over a necklace that she possesses. She's trying to escape. She climbs out of this airship and falls, and the crystal gem, whatever it is, basically protects her and allows her to fall this massive distance to the earth. And then she lands on this piece of wood near a mine. And this young boy, it's Pazu, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just to make sure it's right. Finds her, kind of falls for her a bit, but in this, who is she? What is she? How has she survived? This fall. What did this crystal do? All these questions start becoming answered, and they end up going on this massive adventure where they escape on trains and they run from pirates and they're trying to get to where this crystal comes from, which is the castle in the sky. And that's pretty much it. There's a lot more we'll talk about, but that's the crux of the story. So you're a Ghibli fan, more so than me. So what was you saw it what 4 or 5 years ago? I think you said. I think it's probably
But
been.
I mean, that was the last time I saw it. I saw it earlier than that. Though I
Hmm.
was like an adult when I first saw it.
Oh, interesting.
Like
So
I
what were
didn't
your
see it
thoughts
as a
this
kid.
time round? Kind of recapping what you'd seen before.
Well, it's very 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 Miyazaki. Like it has a
Hmm.
lot of the similar themes and style that the previous Ghibli film, Nausicaa Valley of the Winds, has. Like there's a very heavy flight proponent to the film component to the film. Again, you have like a fairly strong female character at the center of it, with Sheeta and with Nausicaa and in Nausicaa Valley of the Winds. Yeah, I like you. I really really like the movie. Like it's gorgeously animated,
Hmm.
scored beautifully by, as always, Joe Hisaishi. It's yeah, there isn't. It maybe the only real criticism I have of it is that maybe it's a little too long. Like it drags on a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, the pacing is a little off, but even then, there's always something compelling going on. I think, and the character, like the heart of the film, is really the relationship between Pazu and Sheeta,
Yeah.
which works really, really beautifully, and has some really, really poignant and emotional scenes together. Yeah, I really liked it again, and it's an animated film that I would highly recommend in the Ghibli catalog. Though, frankly, I would recommend pretty much the entire Miyazaki catalog. I don't think
Oh, yeah,
Miyazaki's ever made
absolutely.
a bad film.
I really love to go back. I mean, I saw it. I told you I've probably seen it 3 or 4 times in total. Twice when I was a kid because it was on TV, and then once somewhere in my 20s. I don't know where. And then this was the first time, so at least in like 15 years. And it's a really striking, kinetic movie. And
Yeah,
as you said, at times the pace is off. There are moments when it slows down so much and then snaps back in. It doesn't build sometimes. But the pacing of those big action sequences, oh, some of them are absolutely astounding. The whole train sequence,
yeah,
where they're on those wooden tracks, chased by the pirates who jump on there in the car, and then the military come in the other way, and this mad train driver who's trying to get them away is really wonderfully shot. One thing I noticed cinematically, technique wise, which I really liked, was the use of the pullback pan. It almost looks like a reverse zoom without the orientation being pulled back from the camera. And he does that for effect to show emotion. Now, normally a director zooms in for emphasis. What he does is start closer and then just pull back a bit. I really like that technique. It's
yeah,
consistent throughout the film and it works effectively. Soundtrack is gorgeous.
yeah,
Absolutely gorgeous. There's not one moment or song that is in any way anything other than exceptional. For the visuals in the film at the time, for the mood it's trying to set, the ambience it's trying to create, just entirely memorable. And there's so many times that we don't say that. Hit and misses. I mean, even if we go back to say Excalibur, that one major track, which is beautiful, but it's played so many times, whereas this just has a wonderful tapestry of music throughout the entire film.
yeah. I mean, I agree. And there's also like another central element to this film that's a certain central element to most of Miyazaki's films is the theme of man and technology versus nature, which is really at the heart of the movie, like it was in Nausicaa, the previous film. Yeah, because you have this old ancient civilization that basically built the castle in the sky
Hmm.
and built like weaponry of absolutely frightening and awesome power, an immense destructive capability. Also, both in terms of like the robots and like the giant super deadly super laser or
Hmm.
cannon or whatever. That is part of the floating city, a flying city. Yeah, it's like a lot of the shot composition. It's it's funny because I don't remember any of them sticking out, but I do remember like being impressed by the composition of shots throughout. But I just don't remember any particular like sequences in terms of camera movement,
Well,
one way or another.
I think the sequence with the pirates, when Mama and her boys are riding on the, I don't even know what the hell you call them. Mosquito bikes. I don't know. They're basically hovering bikes that have wings that reflect flies or mosquitoes or something like that, and move really quickly. There's a sequence there
And they're
where
heavily inspired by or pretty much directly inspired by Mobius comics.
Mobius, yeah, and you can see that kind of throughout in a lot of the design work of the ships and
Yeah,
castle, etc. That really works well. They're really unique as well, which is interesting because so many times a lot of designs like this are derivative. You know, if you
yeah,
watch a sci-fi film, you're probably going to see a spinner in there from Blade Runner in some guys. It's usually that, but this is really unique in the way it approaches the design of the ship. I love the way that the military have this almost like Nazi-esque bunkered down castle like structure, and then this massive monolithic airship that kind of
yeah,
docks with it. It looks amazing. But the sequence where Pazu has joined them and they're chasing after Sheeta to try and find the castle, that's really well shot. The composition of shots
yeah. It is.
in between and around, the pacing is really nice. It flows really well, I think.
Also, what they managed to do really well in that sequence is just compel or like convey the sense of flight and wind up in the little hover. No, not hover. I forget the name, but basically a plane without engine, without an engine, like
Oh, yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, um, that's
The
basically what
the
they're.
little touches are lovely, aren't they? The kind of elegant swirls that give the animation a real sense of movement.
Yeah, yeah, they are, but also just the sound and yeah, and like the little touches of like the fluttering clothes in the wind and
Mm.
stuff just really manages to convey very effectively. Um, yeah, the sense of being up there in the sky.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, the ambience is really right. I mean, I mentioned when well we discussed it while we were watching it. You know, we just watched I Lost My Body, or Can't Find My
yeah,
Body, and
I lost my body's great.
that Lost My Body, and that soundscape is absolutely stunningly tangible beyond any film I have ever listened to. You know, Castle is 86, and it still manages to achieve a really nice, uh, just a soundscape with depth. Everything has a touch of depth to it, and you can properly, audibly feel the atmosphere that they're trying to make sure you feel like you're in with this animation. I think the narrative's quite interesting as well. As you it plays some on some obvious themes, um, um, nature versus technology, and nature versus war to some extent as well. We see a lot of that, especially from the not the leader of the military necessarily, but the I don't know what you'd call him, the slightly Machiavellian prince who's fine to begin with, and slowly but surely unravels to the villainous kind of archetype that we've seen before. Uh, but there's some interesting moments prior. There's the bit in the well, I guess we should just talk a little bit more about the main narrative. So we've gone over the basics. She's fallen to Earth. Pazu's trying to help her. They go on the run. But there's this shift at one point when they realise that the military are not on their side. They want the girl. They want it for reasons that they don't know yet. Now the pirates just want to get rich, really. And this flip
Yeah,
happens where they end up joining the pirates, which is really cool because they're such colourful characters, and the pop is
and they're
incredibly
basically a
funny.
family led by a mother,
Yeah, on this really funny,
and they're
cool
all her
ship they've
kids.
built. Yeah, very old and very idiotic and mummy loving. They still call her mummer at whatever age it is. And Pop, I thought was hilarious.
Yeah,
Just this, just this old timey guy who's hanging out in the engine room fixing stuff.
the spitting
Just
image of
looks
Doctor
like Doctor
Robotnik.
Robotnik.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that made us laugh our asses off for a while. And then there's also when they're in the mine trying to find their way, led by Pazu, they meet. Is it Uncle Pom? I
yeah,
want to say Uncle
yes,
Pom,
the miner.
the
Yeah,
miner, and he's just a lovely, gentle character. And they do this weird thing where he's talking to them about rocks and how beautiful they can be, and how they're his friends, and how he talks to them, and then he shows them a rock and splits it, and it has this effect that happens when a material on the rock touches the air, and it glows blue like her crystal does when it's activated, which I thought was lovely. There's a point at which she is captured, Sheeta, by the military and taken to so their big facility. And that's the point at which we see our first. I'm going to call them guardians. Are they called robots in the film? But I feel like they're guardians to me. Probably
no,
because
they're
where we end up at
both
the end.
really.
Yeah. And when her crystal activates, this robot's gone. It's been laying dormant. It fell to Earth long ago. It's been laying dormant in this place for years. And it's got an arm off and a leg off and stuff like that. And it's activated. And suddenly it destroys everything in its sight because all it's trying to do is get to her and protect her. Um, because she's got this crystal. And that whole sequence, bloody hell! It's like Superman going insane. You know, an evil Superman taking down a city. The stuff that robot destroys before finally being taken out from like a shell in the sky on one of the airships is really quite magnificent. But there's loads of moments. It's so active as a film. Now, there are quiet moments, there are touching moments, like the miner, for instance. But it's such a quickly paced, snappy film. It's a shame that just on occasion it does slow down and lose that momentum.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's so wonderful about the animation is, I think this is something that Miyazaki in general is just uh, brilliant at. It's like an animator's first job is to breathe life into what is basically dead. So
Mm.
all animation is, well, all movies is basically these dead pictures just put together really quickly to create the illusion of movement. But the way he does it with drawings and illustrations, and the way he breathes characters life into these life and personality into these characters in terms of just their movements, so it's really compelling. And he creates characters that you wouldn't have in live action because they couldn't move, or like the way they do here, they couldn't move that way in live action. Like you couldn't have Pazu's like kind of clumsy, like he's really clumsy. He nearly injures himself a number of times. He nearly like tumbles off the ledge of several nearly tumbles off several ledges. Like they couldn't really compel that in the same way in live action that they managed to do in the Flying Castle, in just in the animation itself.
You can't hit that accentuation of movement, can you? I mean, a perfect example, I think, of what you're talking about is the way Pazu, in any tight space, just shoves his face in first. If he can't get through, he'll put it back.
Like a cat.
But he just shoves his face in like an animal, like a cat, yeah, and then kind of hunches his way through, really comedically. His character movement remind me a little bit of an even more accentuated kind of Tintin, but more clumsy to some extent.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of the characters do have these flashes of unique animation sets that make them feel not necessarily more real, but more akin to that character, make them feel more alive. I think is great.
Yeah, and I mean, and it just tells you so much just at a glance, without any dialogue or anything. Like you know who like the government, the G-man is.
Yeah.
Like the prince you mentioned earlier, like the head of this government agency that's never really sort of mentioned, but is clearly in authority over the military. In this military state, like the world building is never like explored in depth. It's just sort of glanced at and touched on. So we don't really know who the military power is that's going after Sheeta and the crystal and wants to find the Flying Castle. We only know that there's this massive army led by an obese general, and then there's this sort of military secret agent agency that is basically the ones that are in charge of like the crystal and finding the castle. And yeah, and you can tell like at a glance who these people are. Like like even also just like the general of the military, like the obese sort of it's very kind of Prussian like he seems to me.
Yeah.
It's exceptionally well done. And I think that's a general marker for Miyazaki's film in general.
Well, as I said to you at the time, I certainly haven't seen all of them, nowhere near the amount that you've seen, so I'm gonna have to catch up on a lot of stuff. But it's just such a wonderful film to come out of and be kind of happy with. You know, it's a film that kind of just makes you happy because there's so much cool stuff happening on screen, and as you said, the lore. It's not like it's Lord of the Rings. The lore isn't stuffed into every possible dialogue scene.
There's pretty much no exposition.
Yeah, it's all kind of just set up in the world. You clearly understand it by eye. You really don't need to in any way have to deal with understanding anything beyond what you're shown. As you said, the character's so easily identifiable. Everything is so easily identifiable. It makes it a really breezy film to watch.
Although we did note a couple of times in the film that there are a couple of topics where the film seems like has a strange tone, like Pazu being a child laborer in a mine and getting beatings apparently, because he says at one point, "No, my head is so tough it can even handle like my master's fists." Like, okay, that's funny. I guess
there's a few bits like that. There's one bit where Pazu gets punched in the face by an adult. Then there's like constant throughout the he keeps getting told to be a man up, be a man. He's like 12 or something, and every person in the film is like, grow up, do better. What's the matter with you, little kid? Be a man. Harsh, dude. And it goes beyond that, obviously. The fight I thought was quite funny in the street. There's a bit where So the military, some of the military guys end up on the street, as do some of the pirates, and
No, that's
not
not
the
the
pirates.
military
Sorry,
guys. That
it was the
that's
miners.
just the people. Yeah, the miners, people of the
Yeah, and
village.
that one miner. So the military guy rips off his shirt,
No,
does a Popeye almost.
the pirate does that first.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, the pirate, and then the miner does it,
yeah,
and they just slowly but surely slug it out, one punch at a time, kind of getting stuffed each time and then coming back up again. It's just a nice, as you,
yeah,
what did you call it at the time? Rock'em sock'em, very much like
yeah.
that.
Rock'em Sock'em Robots like punch.
That's really
I
funny.
punch you, then you punch me, then I punch
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
then you punch me. Yeah,
that's really really funny.
yeah. It is. Like I do think the my favorite scene in the film is towards the end, which I find enormously moving when like the G-Man has basically revealed that like Sheeta, he is ancient royalty descended from the line of like civilization that built the flying castle, and he's basically activated all of the flying castle's weapon systems.
Mm.
What he intends to do with it is unclear. Like it's clear he wants to subjugate the world or
Some
something.
kind of domination, yeah.
Seems to be the implication, but he never like lays out his his agenda, basically. But but it's clearly destructive, and so Sheeta and Pazu basically come together to stop him, and they know that like Pazu just rescued the pirates, so they're off. They're no longer on the flying castle. And they basically decide, okay, we're gonna sacrifice ourselves. We're going to die, and we're okay with it.
Mm.
And then they basically start the self destruct of the castle together. And I think that scene is really really poignant, both in terms of like the relationship that the two characters have built up until that point, the animation of the actual scene,
Mm.
and then the score by Hisaishi, all really bring that scene home and deliver on it.
Well, it's that duality again, isn't it? That whole sequence is playing on the notion of technology and war versus nature, and the way the
Yeah,
G-Man talks about, I will burn all this down, get all this out the way, and even the
yeah,
half.
cause like all of the like the hall for the weapon systems has basically been overgrown after all
Mm.
this time. It's overgrown with plant life. Like the entire castle pretty much has been overgrown with plant life from this giant tree that is in the middle of everything,
And the crystal in the center
and that annoys him
that
greatly. Yeah,
that he has to pull the roots apart to get to.
yeah,
Yeah, I think my favorite scene in the movie again is in that end sequence, and it's just the Guardian who passes the flower to Sheeta to put it on the grave.
yeah. Right.
I love that moment because it's like her seeing her ancestors and understanding that this robot has been here for
And
don't know how many
The
years.
Guardians too are another example of the animation I talk about, because you mentioned
Mm.
that scene where Sheeta is captured, and then there's the Guardian that's fallen from the sky, and it awakens because she recites like a prayer or like a mantra that she was taught as a child by her grandmother, um, and it comes alive, and the way it interacts with Sheeta, as opposed to the way it like the its awesome destructive power as it lays complete waste to the military fortress.
Mm.
I think is a really really nice juxtaposition to the point where when it is actually killed by the military, by the artillery from the flying fortress. It's actually a kind of emotional moment, especially like for Sheeta.
Mm.
She had gotten like attached to the thing as her protector, and
Well,
so when it
it's
dies,
humanized in a way, isn't it? And that helps,
yes, exactly.
yeah, feel for it
It's
when it gets
humanized
that shot.
through the animation and through. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't have any like living eyes. It has two dots that basically light up,
Mm.
and that's it. But even that is enough for this movie to convey some sort of personality, or at the heart of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, you don't need to have massive expression to connote. You know that those two eyes basically blinking on and off is a form of communication, and it's so simple but effective that as an audience, it's so easy to grasp the understanding they have really quickly, and the relationship that robot has to this girl as this protector. There are some excellent moments in this film. There really, really are. The ending in particular is, I mean, the scene you mentioned is beautiful, but the way it all comes about as well. You know, the way they there's this chase going on prior, and there's the massive airship, and then the pirates airship can't handle it, but they just about managed to get there, but only because they've gone up on this crow's nest on the top of the pirates airship that's actually like a glider almost.
Yeah.
And in the turbulence and the wind, which is so wonderfully animated that you feel it, they snap off and they just about land on this edge of like a green patch on the castle, and there's a bird's nest under it, and the robot. That's another touchy moment as well. You know, they think, oh god, this robot's gonna kick off or do something, and no, all the robot does is very, very gently walk over, just move the glide out the way, and they see the eggs are there, and they're like, oh, okay, we get that. Um, and the beauty of the place. I've got
Yeah.
a thing for nature overgrowing stuff. I love that aesthetic. Last of Us does it brilliantly as a game. Um, I Am Legend, despite it not being an amazing film, it's got that. I love the overgrown cityscape, and this has got that with the castle, and it's beautifully drawn. It looks absolutely gorgeous.
It
And there's
does.
a bit later on, Pazu is swinging on the vines, trying to get out of trouble. You said at the time that's totally Bespin. That's totally Luke.
Yeah, I mean he's
in
hanging
parts.
underneath the castle, like
Yeah,
in front of it, like or like right next to
that
like a
slightly
giant
tilted shot.
tunnel
Yeah,
or like hole. That
yeah,
is basically just dropping out flying robots or flying guardians. And
yeah.
yeah,
When we
that's
should say, I guess,
basically
yeah,
the image of Luke
when they're
hanging from
activated,
Cloud City.
all the robots are sent out when the G-Man activates it.
Yeah,
You know, and start flying at the bottom, and everything starts kicking off between them and the warship, the airship. And in the end, it takes, as you say, those two essentially kind of trying to sacrifice them. So they come together. He's been given a gun by one of the, well, not a blunderbuss almost.
no,
I
grenade
guess.
launcher.
Is it grenade launcher? And he uses two of these massive bullets to shoot his way through areas to get to Pazu in the end. And in that
Not to
final
get to
kind of little
Sheeta. Like he
Sheeta,
is
sorry, and
Pazu. Yeah.
in that in that little moment when they hold hands and they hold the crystal together and they say, is it a prayer they say, or just ancient words, and that's the code for the destruction of all the weapons?
Yeah, and I mean the thing that's a little funny about that scene is that like he tells her, "Tell me the words, the destruction words, and we'll speak them together." And then apparently it's just one word or something.
Oh, Bazu or something, I think it was. They just
Yeah,
both together say the
I don't
word
even
Bazu,
remember
and that's
it.
it.
But yeah, I mean, that is a little
We were
like,
both like, that's a word. Come on, not a magic word that we need. We need a prayer going on here.
but also just like, oh, just teach me the words now, mm,
And
like
he just apparently, I don't know, says it exactly the same time and knows what she's going to say by some kind of telepathy that
yeah,
is never explained.
yeah. That is a little that does come across a little odd,
Hmm.
but not odd enough to break the scene.
No, 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 no. And that the beautiful kind of end point where the castle sheds all this weaponry, and you know there's that one guardian left looking after the animals still, and just
Yeah,
floats off higher into the sky, and the crystal glows. Such a lovely scene, really, really heartwarming. And then we find out obviously that Sheeta and Pazu live. They're alive. They didn't die.
yeah, and they get
Um,
picked up by the pirates who also live.
yeah,
Um,
I love the fact that then one of the last things we see basically is the four, again, we'll have to make our own names, hover flies, whatever you want to call them, are
yeah,
just
they do.
bundled together. They're barely
They call
surviving.
them, I think, something copter or something.
Okay,
In the
we'll
film.
call it flycopter.
Yeah,
And then Pazu and
they
Sheeta.
do have a name, but I just forget it.
Yeah, no, I can't remember either. And then Pazu and Sheeta find the glider again and manage to just about scrape their way to the front of these bikes. So there's this kind of almost comedy, a touching ending, but then leads to a bit of comedy when all these people are stacked on top of these bikes, just about trying to hold on. And it's got that undercurrent of humor, throughout, especially with Pazu in a lot of places. I just think it's a really effective film at what it wants
No, it
to do.
is absolutely. I would agree, and I
It's
highly
definitely
recommend
got
it.
it's got a couple of inconsistencies here and there, a few pacing
I
issues,
mean,
but that's about it.
it's not my favorite Miyazaki film, but I think it's certainly, especially compared with a lot of the animation fare we see these days,
Mm,
it rates very highly.
absolutely. For being made in 1986, it holds up astonishingly well. And animated films that aren't usually Disney or Warner Brothers often don't. So for a studio in Japan to have this wonderful credibility, even so early on in producing films, and look at what they're still producing now. I mean, some of their films are Princess Mononoke is mm, just Spirited Away. I mean, whoa, some amazing stuff. This is what I'm going to have to do now, I think. Try and fit in a Ghibli film like every 2 weeks, maybe. Obviously, we watch a lot, but just one now every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, just fit one in. So, yeah, highly recommended from us. Castle in the
Absolutely.
Sky, available on Netflix. Um, just watch it. It's brilliant. It's really fun. It'll get you engaged. You'll enjoy it. It's got some great moments. The music is absolutely emphatically good, and you'll come out of it feeling pretty happy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Hisashi is one of the best composers working in the industry. I don't think there's any doubt about that
Well,
whatsoever.
we discussed it last night. I mean, he's done everything for Miyazaki, hasn't he?
Yeah,
I mean, that's that's enough proof. Besides the other stuff he's done as well. I mean, that's what one body of work. What hell of a body of work that is.
I mean,
Okay,
there's a pretty amazing concert on YouTube that he did in Tokyo, where he basically scored or played every single Ghibli film.
that's a.
Um,
I wouldn't mind watching that because that's a bit like George Lucas playing,
yeah,
his plethora of amazing musical scores, which is great. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed that. We did. We always do. Um, so what are we watching next week, there, Silver?
well, we watched. It's a film that we've actually already watched
Oh, we
together,
have,
um,
but
which is
I shouldn't introduce it. It's
my
gonna have to be
favorite.
your choice.
Yeah, my favorite comedy film probably
Yeah.
of all time, which is The Pink Panther Strikes Again, which is the third Pink Panther movie, the most absurd one, which really calls back to the Marx Brothers, to
Mm.
slapstick comedy. And I think it's just a brilliant example of it. This was my favorite comedy for such a long time. Like all I would have to do was just recollect scenes in my head, like of Kato and Clouseau's fight in their apartment, and I would break out laughing. Um, yeah, it's the silliest Pink Panther film, but I think that's also what makes it the best because it's the film where they just went fuck it. We don't have to make sense. We don't have to do anything other than just set up all these jokes, just set up all these gags with Clouseau at the center of them, and it's just nonstop gags, and it works. It doesn't work as well in the prior, like the third. No, sorry, Strikes Again is the fourth Pink Panther movie. It doesn't work as well in the third Pink Panther movie or the fifth. Like the Pink Panther movies immediately surrounding Strikes Again. But
Shot in the Dark is the second
yes, it
because
is.
that's the one on
That
Netflix right now, I think.
that's the first like Clouseau centered Pink Panther film.
Right. Okay.
Like the first Pink Panther film was basically with David Niven as the main character, and Clouseau was
Mm.
kind of a side character who stole the show because of Peter Sellers. And then he got his own movie with A Shot in the Dark, which is not. I mean, we call them Pink Panther movies, but really Pink Panther is the name of the diamond in the first movie, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
diamond only reappears in the third movie, Return of the Pink Panther. But we just call them the Pink Panther movies because there's this interconnectedness of like this animated character, like the Panther, and Henry Mancini scores.
Mm.
Uh,
Well, that's what I
which
grew up with, the cartoon. I mean, I'd
yeah,
obviously seen a few Pink Panther films here and there, but all I knew was every Saturday I would see a Pink Panther and it would go doom da doom.
yeah, the
Yeah,
jazzy score by Henry
oh,
Mancini. Yeah,
when that kicked in, that was great. Well, we've already seen it, so we looking forward to it. Looking forward to the podcast. Looking back at the fuck it. Thank you very much for watching, guys. We've got loads of stuff coming up. Loads of films we're going to be watching. More stuff to the channel every week on YouTube. Check us out. We're on every audible platform you can bloody imagine, but I'm still catching up with all podcasts, and that's going to take a while. Talk to us in the comments. What did you think, or what do you think about Castle in the Sky? What do you think is Miyazaki's best film? Which of Studio Ghibli's films really have always grabbed you? And yeah, let's just talk film, folks. Right, I have been Citizen Sleeve. Thank you very much for watching, and this is my amazing friend.
Silver Hawkins.
Take
Take
it
care,
easy, guys.
guys.